So what do the Irish do for an encore? Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down the game we all love each and every day. Best bloggers, broadcasters, and writers in the industry right here. So please lock it in with a like. Comment below on your thoughts on Notre Dame and the ACC. Of course, subscribe. Hit that bell for the notifications. That way you know when we're going live. And it wouldn't hurt for you to join us on Patreon and catch up with those predictions. 16-4 against the spread this past weekend. 16-4 against the spread. Okay, Ben Belden, we've got on the line, covers Notre Dame football, number of podcasts and platforms throughout the years. Catch him on social media. We will post his Twitter handle in just a second. Ben, how you doing today?
Doing well. Always good to come on the show and talk football, especially after a big win of the magnitude of Saturday night.
So how long has it been since there was a big win of that kind of magnitude? I know I've got a year and a team in my mind, but I'll hear from you.
Well, I think the biggest one was 1993 Florida State. So that's about 27 years since they beat number one. Certainly they've had some other marquee wins since then, but that one, like I say, that was the last time that they beat the number one seed like they had. So the number one overall ranking, not number one seed. I guess I'm in basketball mode, but I think I think we understand. So
absolutely. And so there's a few different ways to look at monumental wins. One would be in the moment. You could be the worst team in the country, and if you beat number one, you beat number one. You beat number one. There you go. Okay, and then there's putting into the context of what did this parlay the rest of this season into? Did this become just, okay, that was the highlight of the season or the decade, beating that kind of team, but we went 8-4? Or did this springboard us toward a championship, and did it become a monumental win as a breakthrough? That has yet to be seen. This is a program that's obviously notched 10 or 11 wins for a number of consecutive years under Brian Kelly and is looking for that next step, and they took it on Saturday night. Well, whether they can sustain it, we shall see probably in a few weeks in Charlotte. So there's been some speculation. You mentioned it to me before we started to record. I'd actually Googled Notre Dame just to catch up with anything that was out there, ran across the same narrative. The recruiting impact of a win like Clemson. Notre Dame has had little issue competing in the recruiting wars over the last several years anyway. There's certainly been some substantial upgrades, but doesn't hurt when you can say, okay, we finally did it in that kind of game. Did you see how we played and won the game over what's considered the gold standard in college football?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't go out and say that there's going to be a whole lot of flips in terms of, I saw somebody on social media speculating that Will Shipley, who is, one of the top running backs in the country, recently committed to Clemson, and it was down to Notre Dame and Clemson. I'm not going to go out and say that type of flip is going to happen. However, and I also don't know that it's necessarily a 2021 real game changer. I think in future classes with, high school kids who are juniors right now, who have maybe a little bit less of an idea of where they're headed after graduation, that's where you could really start to see some of that change in terms of, Notre Dame could really pick up some momentum, at least when you compare them to, the Clemsons, the Ohio States, the Alabamas of the world. So that's potentially where you'll see it right now. I don't know that I'm not a recruiting insider by any means, but I'm not even sure that the insiders necessarily know of specific names that Notre Dame could now land. But, the general buzz has been that, some guys that were maybe not quite so up on Notre Dame, or at least had only showed vague interest now, are already calling to set up official visits and that type of thing.
Ben, is there anything you saw out of Ian Book on Saturday night that you hadn't seen before? Is that the best that he's played?
I can't think of a time, honestly. Right. Yeah. I can't think of a time, honestly, that he has played that well and that consistently and that loose. That's the biggest thing for me, is that he's always, when he's struggled, he seems uncomfortable. When he's comfortable and playing football, I think Ian Book's pretty darn good. When he's second guessing himself, not so much. And I think he found the balance Saturday night. It sort of seemed like he was cautious in the right ways, and the fact that he wasn't reckless in turning it over, but also just let it fly a couple of times, and it paid off. I mean, his completion percentage wasn't tremendous. I think he was 22 of 39, if I remember correctly. And so, I mean, he's hovering in the high 50s right there, but he threw it with conviction. He took some shots, and he just seemed willing to do that all night. And I think and there was a stat floating out there that he completed like 60 some percent of his passes against the blitz, which was the biggest thing. We've seen him hold on to the ball and, get happy feet and deliver inaccurate throws and things against the blitz at different times through his Notre Dame career. He handled the pressure, and, part of it, give credit to his offensive line, give credit to Kyron Williams, the running back, for being so good in pass protection in passing situations as well. So, yeah, I think that's about as good as we've seen Ian Book play. The best 4 quarters of football, at least, that he's put together in a game of that magnitude for sure, in a Notre Dame uniform.
One of the staples for this football team over the time that Brian Kelly is upgraded, starting in 2011, 2012, obviously going to a BCS championship game, and then even beyond that, has been the offensive line. It's been the staple unit of this program. But in some of these letdown games against the big opponents, we would have to go back and break down the actual game tape to figure out, okay, where's the offensive line let them down? And we know how good the offensive line has been, and then those players march on to the NFL. So it's not like they're doing it against some kind of weak opponents or schedule. Those players are legit, but they, Miami comes to mind in 2017 where the offensive line didn't have a good game. Again, I temper the criticism in the Clemson playoff game because they didn't score. So does that go to the offensive line or the lack of explosiveness on the outside? But it seemed like this was the game that the offensive line just did everything, at such a high rate that it allowed the offense to function consistently most plays down the field.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment. I think when you think back to that Miami game that you referenced, I think one of the major criticisms then was that Notre Dame never threw the ball down the field. And so it seemed like in that Miami game, couldn't run the ball, couldn't hit on especially in that year, it was the short passing game for Notre Dame that was kind of their bread and butter. And if I'm not mistaken, and Brandon Wimbush started that game, and then Ian Book took over later on after it was decided. So especially with Brandon Wimbush, it was kind of the short passing game, the read option type of stuff that they were kind of relying on, and they just couldn't get anything going there. But yeah, I think this was the best complementary offensive game that Notre Dame's played. And I had said that multiple times throughout the week that you couldn't Clemson only being able to run the ball and then not being able to throw it, or vice versa. And actually, I said if Ian Book threw more than 30, 35 passes, I thought it was going to be a bad thing for Notre Dame. Now it went into overtime. That obviously kind of changed it a little bit. And, but still, though, I think they had enough opportunities on offense that they were able to run and throw with balance. And that obviously helped the offense. And, when one thing gets going, it kind of feeds into another aspect of your game. And like I say, it was just good overall complementary football. And I don't think there was anyone that didn't play well.